Hello, Shemai. Welcome back to my wild Welsh garden, and an especially warm welcome to all my new followers. It is a mystery to me how YouTube decides which videos to recommend to which people. Yes, I don't get it. But however you found me, welcome to my wild Welsh garden. The United Kingdom is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, and Wales is the most nature depleted of the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. And Wales is sadly lacking behind England and particularly Scotland in terms of sort of rewilding initiatives and projects and things. So there really isn't a lot of wildlife around. And I don't have ancestral acres, I don't have a farm to rewild, but I do have a garden, and I do think that our gardens can be so important for helping nature regenerate, provided that we learn to garden in a different way. And that's what I'm doing. I'm learning to garden as a wild gardener. So it's the start of a new year, the start of a new growing season. So this is the time for thinking ahead and making plans for any changes that I'm going to make and anything that I'm going to do differently. So I thought I'd share that with you this morning. And also there are some winter flowers in my garden, so I thought I'd show you those as well. So without further ado, we'll get on. So we're starting at my back door, and because this is just outside my kitchen window, I do try and have winter interest here. And I'll make a confession straight away that I have been giving this bed a bit of attention. There's a lot of primroses in here, and at this time of year they do look pretty sad. They have old and sort of mottled leaves, so I've cut those off, and just to make them look a bit attractive, a bit more attractive. You can see that one there. I've cut the leaves off, but it hasn't started flowering yet. There are a few hellebores here, so I've cut the old leaves off the hellebores. You can see that that one has some buds that are going to come out. And there are some buds on that one as well. But I haven't removed any of the leaves. I would normally have tidied all these leaves off, but I've left them this year. And they've all come from this witch hazel and this, above that, the Verbena bodnantense. It's a bit difficult to see from here, so I'll go on to the next here and show you from up there. These are the little pink flowers of the viburnum. There's only a few of them at the moment. There's one there, and more to come. And then here there's a witch hazel. I've never known it to flower quite so early in the year. It's normally later on into January. But it has these lovely spidery yellow flowers. And I've also bought myself a Mahonia. This was on the recommendation of Tracy the Wildlife Gardener, who also has a channel which is lovely to watch. I've only just bought it. It came before Christmas, so it's there so I can see the lovely flowers. But I'm going to put it up at the top of the garden in the hedge because it will grow quite big, and it is evergreen. So more about the reasons for that later. It's not native, and the trouble is there is a tension that I'm feeling already in this garden between native and non-native plants, because most of my plants are non-native. And all these shrubs here are non-native. And the thing is that they are beneficial to wildlife in terms of their flowers, and the birds certainly use them to perch in. There's a robin in the tree there. You can see him. Yeah, there he is. And the reason why I bought the Mahonia is that it has these fabulous flowers in the middle of winter. So if there are any early pollinators up and about, then there's something for them to feed on. So I think in terms of visiting the flowers, using the flowers, and certainly using the fruit, I don't think it matters whether things are native or not. The problem arises when you are trying to increase the number of invertebrates in your garden, the number of those creatures that are at the bottom of the food chain that feed all the creatures higher up, because they feed on the leaves of plants, and they're not going to feed on the leaves of non-native plants. Well, some do. Some will sort of make the jump between species, and they're the ones that we call pests, and they're the ones that cause gardeners difficulties. But most of our native insects will want native plants to feed on. So that is the plan. Well, that is one of the plans for this year, is to plant more native plants in this garden. Yes, because as I'm looking here, most of these plants are non-native. Some of them, like the aster, that tall aster there, we do have a native aster. Well, why haven't I got the native aster in this garden? Good question. Now, while I was down at this part of the garden, I thought I'd show you the problem that I have with these wood chip paths, because you can see here they've rotted, and they've really, here particularly, I think because this is where the birds sort of fertilise it as well. It's basically just compost. So that's the next plan for this year. And that's what I'm going to get started on first, which is to remove all this wood chip and buy some slate. But one of the good things about wood chip is that it's a great place for seeds to germinate. And so I've got all sorts of things growing in here. There's a wild strawberry there, and an oregano there, and lots of forget-me-nots. And also, something that I do have a lot of in this garden is primroses. So I'm going to dig up the primroses, I think, and relocate them. I've put a few spring pots around the place. These are crocuses. And up there, there's some crocuses, and also want some of those little irises, I think they are. And they will give me a little bit of colour quite soon, really, looks like. And then that will make me smile. And there are signs of crocuses coming up in the lawn. These are species crocus. And so they've been in a couple of years now, I think. And the plan is that they will naturalise and be a little carpet in the spring and just look lovely. Well, there are not many seeds left on those sunflowers. The birds have eaten everyone. But I still see them foraging up and down the stems. So there must be insects in all the cracks and crevices and things. And this is the runner bean that I left for the birds. And they've done a good job of eating most of them, I think. There's not many left. You can see where they've nibbled their way in. And this one here is completely empty. And I do have to say, it looks absolutely disgusting. But this is a wildlife garden, and so I'm looking at it from the point of view of the creatures. And there's an early flowering daffodil. But you know, I'm sure I planted quite a few bulbs there. But only one's come up. And some more spring pots. The owl has got some irises on his head, and there are some irises down there, all very strategically placed so I can see them from my kitchen. And then just going up onto the little orchard with the apple trees and the pear tree and the fruit bushes. So I do need to come and give the fruit bushes some attention, because they've been in, I think this is going to be their 3rd year. So I do need to prune out the old growth and hopefully promote new growth and more fruit. That's the plan anyway. And then there's another spring pot there. That looks like crocuses. And some spring bulbs in there. That is daffodils and tulips. I'd like to introduce my latest addition to the garden. This is Ivy the wood sprite. Now she is going to be my garden guardian, and she is going to help me to look after the garden and look after the wildlife in this garden. Now she was a Christmas present. One of my daughters said, what would I like for Christmas? And I said I would like this. And my other daughter phoned me up just to check that I did, because she thought it was so horrible. But I think she's quite cute. So she is going to help me with my garden this year. And then this bed I haven't done anything to. But again, mostly non-native plants. So I think some of them I'm going to take out, but I'm going to definitely put more native plants in here. So we're going to take a quick nip into the greenhouse here, just to show you what's happening with the teasels. Now this is a teasel head that all the little seeds had started germinating in the seed head, and I chopped it up and put little chunks into these modules, and they've all grown. And when I planted them, there was no roots on them at all, but if I pull them up now, there's quite a substantial root system. So this is the ideal time for kind of pricking them out. So that's what I've done here. I've put them individually into these modules. Oh, I'm also growing some pinhead mould there, looks like. Interesting. Yeah, so I've obviously got far too many teasels I don't know what to do with. So I'll probably just divide these up and put them around the place and let them take their chances. And underneath the bench here, I've got this lovely thistle that's germinated. So I'm going to try and dig that up. It might be a bit difficult because of the concrete, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to dig that up and put it out in the garden. Thistles are the larval food plant of the painted lady butterfly. So if I was to get painted lady butterflies coming to the garden, this would give them somewhere to lay their eggs. And if I got painted lady caterpillars, then that would make me very happy. And then there's a very full pond. And then up to the hedge at the back of the garden. Now the problem with a native hedge in the UK, I am aware that people are watching this from all over the world, but in the UK, most of our native sort of plants and trees and things are deciduous, and so for a big chunk of the year there's no privacy. The only really evergreen native plant that we have is holly. So I do have a holly there which is going to go into the hedge. But in addition to that, I've also planted some ivy. So there's the wild native green ivy growing up there. And there are two variegated ivies. There's that one there. And there's that one there. And they will grow up through the bushes and hopefully give me a bit more privacy. And this is where I'm going to plant the Mahonia too, because that does grow quite tall and it is evergreen. Now there's this bush here, just next to the pond. I don't know what it is. I put it in when I first came. I don't know what it is or where I got it from, and it's not native, and it really doesn't do any favours. It doesn't seem to have any flowers or any fruit or anything. So I'm going to dig that up, and I'm going to have a go at making a hibernaculum, which is an underground sort of place filled with bits and pieces and things where creatures like frogs and toads and lizards and other invertebrates can spend the winter. So that's going to be in a future video. Because as I've said previously, I don't get an awful lot of wildlife in this pond. I certainly have never seen a frog or a toad or a newt. So I'm hoping that if I can make it a bit more native and a bit more animal friendly around the pond, then that might make a difference. So I've made a hole in the wall here. This is a breeze block wall. This is one of the problems I think with this garden, is it's surrounded by walls. When I say I mean my brother. He came and made a hole in the wall for me. So I just say hello to the garden guardian on our way past. And then this is geranium Roseanne, which has finally stopped flowering. And along here is the nettle that's made a home for itself. Now, I had 2 nettles that germinated in the garden last year, if you remember. There was this one and one down nearer the house, which I dug up and put in a pot. Well, I didn't know what to do with this one, and I've decided that I'm going to keep it, but I'm not going to put it in a pot. I'm just going to leave it and compare, really, see if it really does try and take over the world. But because it's quite close to the path, and nettles do grow quite tall, I'm going to relocate it a little bit further back, just by the water butt there, so nobody will get stung as they walk past. And then these are the vegetable patches, which are just a disgrace. What can I say? And then down this path, past the kale, winter kale in there. This is Dor Benton kale, and this is perennial cabbage, which is lovely. And this one is perennial broccoli, so I'm looking forward to some nice broccoli in the spring. And then down through onto the lawn. I put some fruit out here. I put some apples and some pears and a bit of banana, and they've eaten all the apples, the birds, and they didn't like the pear or the banana. So I wanted to talk a little bit about cultivars. I talked a little bit about natives and non-natives, but then there's a whole thing about cultivars and whether they are as beneficial to wildlife as the ordinary wild form. For example, this is a rowan. Now, we have a native rowan in this country, but this isn't the wild one. This is a cultivar, and it has yellow berries rather than red berries. And this is a willow. We have lots of native willows in the UK, but this is a cultivar, and it has pink willows. So I believe that the willow trees support more species than any other species, more even than the oak trees. But does this cultivar, although it looks pretty, I mean, it looks much prettier than our native willows, but does it support as much wildlife? And this is a cherry tree, but it's not a wild cherry, it's a winter flowering cherry, so it's slightly different. And this is a hawthorn, but it's not a wild hawthorn, it's actually a pink form. So will it support as much wildlife as the native hawthorn? So I started to worry a bit, really. I started to worry that I'd made a mistake and I shouldn't have planted these cultivars, that I should have just planted native trees. So I did look into this a bit, and some Americans have done some research where they grew cultivars of various plants and trees alongside native plants and trees, which of course would be different in America. And what they found was that it depended what the difference was. So if the cultivars had been sort of bred and selected for a different leaf colour, so if the leaf colour was red, then they had less insects feeding on them. But if the leaf colour was green, then the cultivars had as many different sorts of insects feeding on them as the wild ones. So that's reassuring. Although I've got cultivars of these trees, they should still support the British wildlife. And now we're going up onto the side garden. And I don't think I've taken you into the polytunnel before. There's not an enormous amount going on at the moment. Just some rather weedy looking leeks and some chard. But that will grow up in the spring. But what I do have is a little patch of nettles that's germinated here. So I'm going to dig that up and put them behind the polytunnel, and then I'll have another patch of nettles there. Now we're going down the side of the polytunnel, another area that I've sown with meadow grass. But down at the end here, there is a winter honeysuckle, which is flowering. Now this is supposed to have a really lovely scent, but I can't smell it. If I sort of stick it right up my nose, then I can maybe get a little whiff, but I certainly can't smell it like other people can. And then down here at the back of the polytunnel, there's an access path, which I don't need. So I'm going to take that up, that wood chip and the membrane underneath. And that's where I'm going to plant those nettle seedlings. So I can have a big nettle patch there and it won't get in anybody's way. And then coming back across the Magnolia stellata and the Pieruses, back down the slope to the bird table and the bird feeders and the back door. And we've been right round the garden. So it's the start of a new year, the start of a new season. I'm looking forward to the new growing season. I'm looking forward to the wildlife coming back, to the invertebrates and other wildlife, more I hope than last year. And new plans for developing the garden. The first is to renew the paths. Now, I do have to say, if I wasn't as old as I am, I wouldn't be putting slate down. I would continue with the wood chip path. But the big drawback of wood chips for somebody like me is that you do have to keep topping them up, and I'm just getting too old for it. So I'm kind of future-proofing the garden as well. So as I get older, it will be less work. That's the long-term plan anyway. But as well as doing the paths, I'm going to plant some more hedge plants, trees and shrubs along the back wall to make it a bit thicker. So more privacy and better for wildlife. And then the long-term plan over the year is more native plants and more wild forms of plants, so fewer cultivars and more where there is a wild form. I'm going to have the wild form to begin with, at least, as well, and maybe to replace the cultivars, but we'll see. That's the kind of the long-term plan anyway, to move to wilder plants. Like I say, I'm looking forward to the new year. I'm looking forward to the garden coming alive again. I'm looking forward to it stopping raining. Feels like it's rained for 100 years. And yeah, so thanks for watching the video. Thanks for joining me in my garden. And I love to have your company, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hwyl fawr.